meeting you before.
So microphone as well. Good morning, Chairman Kelly, and good morning to the CARB. Thank you for considering my application.
What I'd like to do, Jim, and I'll out of fairness to all applicants, I'll go ahead and go through our interview rules real quick with your procedures, if you don't mind. Thank you for joining us today for your interview. We're excited to learn more about your background and why you're interested in applying for another term on the commission. Before we begin with the questions, we would appreciate if you could provide us with an opening remark and a brief background about yourself. This will give us a better understanding of your qualifications and motivations for seeking another term on the commission. Following your opening remark, each of our recommendation board members will have the opportunity to ask you a question of their choosing. They may also ask you a follow-up question if necessary. We believe this will allow us to gain a comprehensive understanding of your skills and experiences. After the first set of questions, we will proceed with the second round, where each board member will have the chance to ask additional questions. Towards the end of the interview, you will also have the opportunity to share a closing remark with us. Please keep in mind we've allocated 45 minutes for the interview. If we're running out of time, we'll stop the second set of questions and provide you enough time for a closing remark. Once the interview is complete, you're welcome to join the remainder of the meeting. Once again, thank you for being here. We're looking forward to learning more about your qualifications and why you're interested in a second term on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me start by saying, for the record, my name is James Goughnour. I live in the town of Payson, which is in Gila County. I've been a resident of the state of Arizona for 44 years, and I've been married to my wife, Dolores, for 23 years. And before I get started, I'd like to just say a thank you to the CARB for your volunteer work. As a commissioner, I know that your pay grade is about the same as what it is on the commission. So on behalf of all of us here on this side of the dais, we appreciate your volunteerism. Thank you for the great work of the CARB.
Thank you.
To me, being a commissioner for the Arizona Game and Fish Department is an absolute honor. But with that honor comes a lot of commitments to it. And the number one commitment is to be prepared for the meetings. It requires a lot of research to get done. It requires a lot of listening to constituents. And it requires seeking out questions and answers to the topics that the commission is working on. And I say seeking out because everyone doesn't always come forward. Sometimes commissioners have to take the initiative to go talk to different groups to get their inputs. And I'll even say that there are some groups and individuals that are antithetical to the mission of the commission and to the North American model. And all of those inputs are important, and it's the commissioner's responsibility to get those inputs before he makes his or her decision. After all of that research and after all of those discussions, then the commission is required to take that and make the best decision that supports the public doctrine. The public trust doctrine is the thing that drives everything about wildlife and conservation. And so that's a great honor along with a great responsibility as being on the commissioner. When I stood before the CARB 5 years ago, I committed to do whatever it took to be prepared for all commission meetings and all issues that come before the commission. And I strive to accomplish that during my time on the commission. And I can tell you, after 5 years of experience, to say that one supports the North American model or they understand the commission of the department or the mission of the commission, it's a lot easier to say that words than it is to actually govern and to set policy within those principles. A lot of work goes into the decisions that the commission makes routinely. I was fortunate enough to get copied on several of the letters that came to the governor's office and to the CARB for my recommendation onto the commission. And I was, number one, very humbled by the words that were written. But number two, I was extremely grateful that a lot of the constituents out there recognized the hard work that the commission does and my commitment to doing that. I think the future for the Game and Fish Department is extremely bright going forward. My passion to be a commissioner is greater today than it was the first time that I applied to be a commissioner. And I am dedicated to continue the work that I have done over the last 5 years. I have the time available to do the work of a commissioner and to continue the success of the commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions the Carb might have for me.
Thanks, Jim, for the opening remark. We appreciate it. John, you want to go ahead and kick it off with your first question?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Goughnour, my first question for you is relative to the department's habitat policy.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last decade or so, the Commission has weakened its stance on wildlife and habitat conservation. For instance, the words, quote, conserve, enhance, and restore Arizona's diverse wildlife resources and habitats through aggressive protection and management, end quote, were removed from the department's mission and replaced with the words, quote, to conserve Arizona's diverse wildlife resources, end quote. Last year, in 2022, the Commission changed their policy on habitat loss from requiring the department to seek, quote, compensation at a 100% level when feasible for actual or potential habitat losses, end quote, to instead directing the department to, quote, seek all opportunities to identify and implement conservation measures, end quote. My question to you is, should the Commission again direct the department to aggressively conserve, enhance, and restore the state's wildlife and habitats, or is the current policy language okay with you?
So a couple of comments with that, and if I might, one correction. In the Commission policy, the reimbursement for 100% of the value was recently removed from the Commission policy in that area. Habitat is important to everyone. Since when I first was appointed to the Commission, the first committee that I sat on was the Habitat and Landowner Relations Committee. Since joining that 5 years ago, every year the amount of dollars that were available for habitat has increased. And I'm happy to report that in the current fiscal year, $3.1 million is going to be allocated to habitat this year. Now that includes the department portion, plus the WCOs and any grants that are available to the department. But it's a remarkable state to put that out there. As far as the wording that gets changed, I agree. Every year the Commission goes through the wording on some of these. Times change, society changes. I don't think that the mission or the concept of our landowner relationships program or our habitat program has changed at all in my 5 years. In fact, I think it has been streamlined. It's been a closer relation with the WCOs to get these projects done, and I think it's on a good path going forward.
No follow-up questions.
Thanks, John. Rich?
Mr. Commissioner, wow, another 5 years, huh?
Yes, sir.
I commend you for your past service and your willingness to serve another 5 years, and I also commend your sweetheart. She must be a real saint.
That's why I mentioned her name. She's part of this too.
So, Commissioner, what are your thoughts on renewable energy installations and the effects it might have on wildlife recreation access and hunting access?
Thank you for that question. And I think it kind of relates back to a little bit of what Mr. Wines was saying there. The energy, and I'll lump all energies in here. We're not just talking about solar or wind energy. We're talking about fossil fuel energy as well. And the fact is that the state of Arizona has a population of 7.5 million people. This state is growing at about 100,000 people every year. So every decade, we're adding 1 million people to our population. And with COVID, people are now saying that every 9.5 years, we're gonna add 1 million people. Those are facts that are not, I mean, that's not disputable. That trend has been in place for over a decade. So renewable energy, sources of power, sources of water, housing, all of those things are going to need to be built to accomplish that. So for some time, a decade ago, the department wrote a manual that said when we bring new energy into the state, and it's going to impact habitat, it has to, it just takes its presence there. The department wrote a set of standards that we would engage with those companies early. We would talk to them about wildlife impacts, habitat impacts, connectivity impacts of what they were planning. The department tracks every single new energy project that is being registered. And we meet with those groups and we talk to them about what improvements they can make, what changes they can make. I'll give you a great example of one. On a wind turbine farm, we found that the way that they staggered the wind turbines forced specifically doves to fly in a certain pattern to avoid the first windmill, but to only get hit by the second one. And so we found that by changing the locations of those, we could minimize some of those impacts. So it is the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality that for state operated renewable energy, they're the ones that will approve those energy stations. For the BLM, it's any BLM land, they take care of their own. The U.S. Forest Service is also an approver of it. So the department isn't really in that decision maker, but we do all we can to inform them and to help them get the right station that they need to set up with minimal impact to the landscape. And I'll just add an anecdotal note in talking to a couple of the people that engage in this. We find for the most part, the companies are very accommodating to the wildlife needs. So thank you.
Thank you.
No follow-up, Rich? Okay, thank you. My question for you, Jim, the role of all successful commissioners is to help develop effective strategies to manage Arizona's wildlife in the best ways possible. In order to do this effectively, a first-hand knowledge of our state's diverse wildlife is invaluable. Could you please elaborate on your life's experiences relating to our state's wildlife, as well as your interests in hunting, fishing, bird watching, or other non-consumptive outdoor activities?
Mr. Chairman, you said I have 45 minutes, so if I did.
Yeah, give us the short answer.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So what actually started me on this path is several years ago in Payson, I am an avid bass fisherman. I own a small business where I build and repair custom fishing rods, but I know my wife's in the audience, but I'll say I'm addicted to bass fishing, so it's bad. And but we were able to see at Roosevelt Lake that from the tournaments that were going on down there, the weights of the 5 fish that are brought to the scale were going down. And so fishermen began to say, there's something wrong with this lake, there's something wrong, and this happened over a 2-3 year period. And after that time, it was so bad that we could show data from these bass fishing tournaments over the years as the trend was going down. The fish were getting smaller, not as many were being caught. So we formed a group up there called the Tonto Basin Roundtable, and we met with the Game and Fish Department, and they went out and did a survey of the lake, and they found that there was actually an invasive species, a gizzard shad, which is actually a bait fish, usually not a bad thing on an eastern lake that has a lot of structure and cover in it. But in our impounds here in the west, they found that they were attacking the eggs or the nests of the crappie and the bass. And so we saw this slight decline going on over years until it reached to the critical mass. And so with the help of the department's biologists and the aquatics group, they came up with two fixes. One was to bring in some Florida strain bass, which are more aggressive feeders. They are ferocious eaters of bait fish. And to put habitat structures into Roosevelt Lake. Today there are over 1,000 structures in Roosevelt Lake that are artificial habitat down there. Those two, you could see an immediate turnaround in the tournament results. And here we are 5, 6 years down the road, and I would say that Roosevelt Lake is one of the premier bass fishing lakes across the country again. So that passion kind of led me to do that. I'm an avid turkey hunter. That's my thing to go out there and work with them. But I also enjoy going to a lot of the different camps. As a commissioner, we get to go to the youth deer camp. We get to go to small game camps. We get to go to a lot of the WCO camps. The Arizona Deer Association holds different camps that I enjoy going to and talking with the deer community about the Game and Fish Department and about what role the commission plays in there. So I'm a lifelong kind of person with hunting and fishing, and I just enjoy the outdoors.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate your answer.
Thank you, sir.
Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You sort of neutered my first question that I have about attendance, so I'm going to jump down to my second question. Fair chase, along with the North American model for wildlife conservation, should be the two backbones of hunting in our nation and state. Tell me why this statement is accurate and your views of the two items, fair chase and the North American model.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Madden. So let me start with the North American model. Long history there. And it is really the guiding light. As all of you know, in the early 1900s, wildlife across the western states was being decimated. There were no rolls. There was a great market for hides and meat back east and in Europe, and a lot of people were into the transportation business, literally down the Mississippi to New Orleans to send hides and antlers and meat to Europe. In the early 1900s, President Theodore Roosevelt, Aldo Leopold, and several others got together and said, we need some conservation models. And that's how the North American model was established. 7 tenets in the North American model, and all of those guide principles that we have today. I've said in many meetings, in fact, I've said it from that podium, that when we have a tough decision to make as a commission, the North American model is a guiding light to hold us to that. The wording is old, just like a lot of our older documents, including the Constitution, but the theme, the message is in there and provides a lot of answers to issues that are addressed before the commission. For fair chase, this is a new concept. One of the opportunities that commissioners get to do twice a year is we go to the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. This is 11 different states in the West, a couple of provinces in Canada, and including Alaska. And we talk about what are the accomplishments that a commission has done or a department has done over the last 6 months, and what areas do we need to improve. When I started in there, fair chase was barely mentioned. Today, every other state is starting to catch up to Arizona with a concept of fair chase. Fair chase is basically that. It gives the animal an equal opportunity of escape, of detection, not necessarily take, but an escape of detection. And we've had many discussions about this, including trail cameras and coyote contests that were out there for prize money. And so fair chase is the equal opportunity for the animal to escape. It's something to be adhered to. Technology is advancing at a faster rate than any of us can imagine. We see it every day in our lives. The same is true in the hunting and fishing community. In the hunting community, I mean, firearms now that can shoot 1,000 yards out of the box, laser-guided bullets, you know, from your smartphone to your scope to calculating wind speeds and directions before you shoot. Those things all have to be evaluated. The Arizona Game and Fish Department, through the commission, looks every month at new technologies that are coming online. It's important to do that because some of these we need to get ahead of before they actually get ingrained into the hunting community. And I'll use the trail cameras as a perfect example. Trail cameras were around for a lot of years before people started to think about it as a fair chase issue. Once we did that, it was much harder to convince people because now it was part of their package to hunt, and they were just used to using that as a tool for hunting. Fair chase allows us that opportunity to get in front of some of these new technologies, and we are changing statutes and changing rules within the department every year to acknowledge laser guided bullets as an example is to be unethical and not deemed to be fair chase by the commission. So both very important, Mr. Madden, and you are correct. They are the backbone to hunting in Arizona.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you describe the landowner compact program and if in your term anything that you've done to that would affect it?
Absolutely, thank you. What a great program to start with. Arizona is kind of unique. Let me start with some adjoining states where some states will actually issue tags to landowners to get access to their properties. In Arizona, we have a landowner contract agreement where ranches sign on to this program, and we provide funding for habitat improvements, for conservation work, for survey work on those different landowners. Could be a ranch, could be agriculture. All of those are the same. However, by working with these landowners and keeping that access, it allows the department to issue tags there. It allows the public access to go in there and hunt. But at the same time, we respect the landowners by putting up gates or sign-in boxes or whatever it takes to keep that relationship open between the landowners and the hunting community. So the commission has diligently worked through landowner relations to make sure that we have that. And if I didn't state this clearly, we allow the landowners to actually set the rules on their land. So if a landowner wants to have one section of his property hunted and maybe not another section, we accommodate him to do that. But the whole goal behind all of this, sir, is to gain access for our public, for our hunters, for outdoor recreation, not only just hunting, but recreational uses of those properties.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I can ask you.
Yes, you bet.
You touched on something earlier, Rich's discussion with you about solars, and you said that the department tracks energy projects that are registered. I have firsthand experience with an energy project that wasn't registered because there was no line sighting involved, and wildlife was affected by it. Have you, in your term on the commission, done anything to ensure that caveats like is line sighting required or not a way for an energy utility to get out of talking to the department? I mean, I don't feel that these projects should go in that can jeopardize access to public lands without the commission being involved. And I think I'd like to know if you think that caveat is still there, or that loophole.
So I am not familiar with any that have not been at least alerted that they're doing this. I think at some point they'd have to go to ADEQ or to BLM or to the Forest Service to apply for permits or whatever. So they would have to have that. I think the authority is in statute. So that's who's going to make the ultimate decisions on solar energy projects. So the commission and the department is taking a stance, and we're doing all we can to minimize that impact, because you're correct, it is not zero, but to minimize that impact for the protection of wildlife and habitat and corridors in those areas.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
John, second question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Goughnour, my second question regards commercialization of wildlife. Wildlife is a limited resource that has the potential to create profit when used for commercial enterprise. In general, market hunting and fishing are practices of the past. But there is still a lot of money spent on sport hunting and angling. Do you believe the profit motive can negatively impact the North American model of wildlife management? And if so, what practices do you see as a threat to that model, which we should never accept here in Arizona?
So just clarification, when you say profit model, are you speaking of the one in England?
Profit motive. Profit motive.
Motive, I'm sorry, motive.
Not the model. Not the English.
Thank you. So back to the North American model, right? One of the tenets is that there will not be commercialization of wildlife. We have seen revocation cases where people have done this in the past. I do think it's a threat. I don't support any type of commercialization of it. But once again, we go back to the wording of the North American model. There are farms. Everybody buys fish from salmon farms that are created. So that portion of it to the economy, I think, is a good thing. But I think if you put wildlife in there, real wildlife, that you threaten then the existence of that. It's another motive for people to go out and exploit the wildlife that we have in our country. This takes us back to the early 1900s and the beginning of the NAM, North American Model discussion. So I do not support any type of commercialization or anything that even gets close to that.
Any follow-up, John?
No follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Rich?
Commissioners, I'm sure, are aware, most recently the state of Colorado is starting to introduce northern gray wolves into their state. What concerns might the Game and Fish Department and Commission have, along with its partners, over further introduction of the gray wolves and the effect on the Mexican gray wolf program?
Yes, sir. Great question. Last year when I was the chairman of the commission, we penned a letter to the governor of Colorado and the commission of Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, informing that we were greatly concerned about this. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife leads the Mexican gray wolf program with assistance of the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the New Mexico Game and Fish Department. Our fear was that as we see Mexican gray wolves move further to the north, we've taken some as far as Flagstaff already, and with the larger northern gray wolves coming south, if they would crossbreed, if they would do that, we would lose the entire endangered species or the subspecies of the Mexican gray wolf. And that's the concern of this commissioner, and I think the commission in general. A lot of time and effort and money and knowledge has gone into expanding the Mexican gray wolf program. It's on the upswing. The program is successful. It's doing what the Endangered Species Act requires agencies, it requires the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Agency to do. An interaction with a non-Mexican gray wolf species would be catastrophic. And so the commission will do whatever it takes to keep those two species separated. Right now in Colorado, they're telling us that all of the wolves that are going to be released are going to be collared. They are monitoring those wolves. If one of them crosses into either Utah or into Arizona. The different agencies will be alerted. They will go capture that wolf using the GPS data and tranquilizers, and they will return it to Colorado. That's the way the rule is stated today. We'll see where that goes down the road, but yes, sir, we are, I guess the word is monitoring. We'll continue to watch the progress of that over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. Jim, my second question, Arizona is blessed to have a large number of non-governmental organizations, NGOs as we call them, dedicated to the conservation of big game animals as well as fish and bird species. The volunteer work performed by these NGOs not only supplements efforts of the Arizona Game and Fish Department personnel, but it also brings in serious matching funds through programs like Pittman-Robertson. What are your feelings on their contributions, and what volunteer work have you been involved with related to wildlife NGOs in Arizona?
Pretty simple answer, Mr. Chairman. We could not do what we do without our NGOs / WCOs, wildlife conservation organizations. You're right. The volunteer work is remarkable of what they do, whether it's building fish habitats, removing fence lines, working on streams up in Payson last year. Trout Unlimited brought 100 people onto the East Verde River, and after the big flood that they had up there, and reconstructed the lake or the stream to put rocks and put trees in, so that there were areas for habitat for the trout that are in the East Verde River. I could say the same thing about the Antelope Foundation, the Arizona Elk Society, the Arizona Deer Association. We go on and on. But these groups of volunteers that come out are just phenomenal. They're there to volunteer their time, to volunteer their efforts and their knowledge to supporting wildlife, and quite frankly, we couldn't do it. From a financial standpoint, as you so accurately stated, it is imperative that we can use those dollars as matching funds so that Arizona qualifies for more PR and DJ dollars that come into our state and go right back into the habitat into the state. So huge effort, can't thank those guys a lot. And I'm looking at you, I mean, some of you guys are them. So thank you for doing that, and we'll continue to work with NGOs and WCOs every opportunity we get.
Yeah, one thing, Jim, could you talk about which groups you've personally served with?
So a couple that I work with, and one in Payson is our Mogollon Sporting Association. This is a conservation group out of Payson, and lots of volunteers and lots of work that goes into habitat projects, fishing projects, stocking of our community fishing waters up there, stocking of the lakes, and stocking of Roosevelt Lake. So yeah, just been involved with MSA for about 15 years now, and great organization.
Thank you, Jim. Pat?
Thank you. Jim, tell us about how you see the role of commissioners in interacting with department employees and pushing objectives.
Great question, thank you. One of the endeavors I took when I became a commissioner was to go out and meet with different branches and divisions within a department. As 5 years as a commissioner, I'm happy to report that I have met with each and every branch and every division within the department, where we have a communication meeting and we get to talk to the employees about what the role of the commission is, how the commission views different mission statements for the department, and how we support the activities that they do out there. I was amazed that when I started talking to some of these groups, they didn't have a real firm understanding of what the commission is and how we help them in their jobs. And I'm happy to say that after 5 years of doing this, and by the way, we schedule one of these meetings most every month, We've been able to help educate the employees about how the commission helps, what our role is in the big picture of conserve and protect, and be able to help them do their jobs better. More importantly, though, Mr. Madden, is the opportunity to go out and speak to public groups. Again, on a monthly basis, I travel around the state, as I said, from Payson, so a lot of organizations around Rim Country and the northern part of the state. I go meet with them, whether they're homeowner associations or PTAs or whatever the organization is. I get to go talk with them and help spread the word of what is conserve and protect to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. Why is it meaningful of what we do? Why do we need to have hunting? Why is it regulated? A lot of the public doesn't understand this, and it gives commissioners a great opportunity to go spread the word about what the hunting is. One of the biggest topics that we have in Rim Country is feeding of wildlife. And a year ago, we started a campaign to inform people in Rim Country the dangers of feeding wildlife. And we gave lots of examples that it doesn't end well for the wildlife. People actually get hurt. 12 people in Payson area had to go to the hospital last year because of wildlife interactions, and it goes on and on. After a year of being on the radio, of being on podcasts, and discussing different topics that relate to the commission and the communities out there, I think it's making a difference. And we're able to help educate the public at large, plus the Game and Fish Department, about what the role of the commission is.
Follow up. What part does the director play in all this?
Director Gray?
Yes.
So we jokingly say that the commission has one employee, and it's because it takes 5 commissioners to direct one employee. That one employee is the director, is Director Gray. One of the finest communicators I've ever met in my life. That's a key piece of his success in this department. He promotes anything that is going to help advance the department or support the commission. Anytime that I had a question, anytime I had consternation, he's always able to give wise counsel on how decisions should be made, or if he can add any input to that. But he's a fantastic director. He's one of the longest tenured game and fish directors in the country. Ty has 31 years is with the Game and Fish Department. And when we go to one of these waffle meetings that we were talking about earlier, he chairs different committees. His time is sought after. His input and his counsel is appreciated not only by Arizona, but by all the western states.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give me a sense of what you feel the benefits are of having cattle responsibly grazing on public lands?
It's a big question, sir. So, cattle grazing on public lands is a right. That's in statute, that's in law. Damage to riparian areas, damage to habitat, damage to wildlife are all pieces of that. And at any time on the commission, we address those areas. We've also had issues of trespass cattle, where intentionally or unintentionally cattle move off onto other allotments where they shouldn't be. So we promote legal grazing where a pasture is identified, but there's a responsibility to make sure that the fencing is adequate, that the water is adequate, and that the rules are followed there. Back to our HPC conversation, one of the remarkable things that I saw was we were getting complaints on one landowner's allotment that the riparian area and the stream itself was being ruined by cattle that were in the area. Through our HPC and our LRP program, we were able to go put water tanks very close to the stream. And guess what? The cattle went to the water catchments rather than go down to the stream. So there are solutions to those problems out there. And through our LRP program, I think we've done some great work. I'm not saying that it's resolved. There are many issues out there, as you know, but the commission continues to monitor those.
May I ask a follow-up?
Please, Norm.
You touched on trying to find a way to mitigate the riparian situation. Do you have other suggestions or ideas to add, or do you even feel that ranchers who pay to protect and manage public lands as part of their day-to-day operation? I mean, do you have other tools or thoughts in your toolbox that might give value to ranchers to try to keep the public lands open?
Yes. It's kind of a description of the landowner relationship program. We do that, but back to other ideas, fencing is always a big one. I mean, elk will knock down fence, deer will knock down fence, cattle will knock down fence. So it is a constant maintenance program to make sure that those fences are in good repair around these areas. Putting fences up, we saw one example where they put it along the riparian area, so the cattle actually could not go there due to the fence boundary that was there. But the way to execute the landowner relationship program is to develop these relationships. These are long-term relationships. Our wildlife managers and different people from the LRP program visit these ranches on a regular basis. We like to have that lines of communication. We want to hear what the ranchers are hearing. And I'll be the first to tell you, hunters and anglers and OHVers and people that are on those public lands, they are not always the best stewards of those lands. And I've seen pictures of some of the damage that's been done, that the landowner then had to go back and replace that. But we understand that. We want to work with the landowners through the commission or through the LRP to make sure that we understand what those problems are and we can help fix them. But it's real, and it's real.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do any of the other board members have any questions for Mr. Goughnour? Hearing none, Jim, could we get a closing remark from you, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my gratitude. Being, as I started saying, it's an honor to be a commissioner. And I think if you spoke to any commissioner that we have on our board, they would say the same thing. Our commission today, and the ones that I've been associated with over the last 5 years, is a well-working group. We all have conservation on our minds first. The protection of wildlife is paramount. We are not a political organization. There is nothing political about the Arizona Game and Fish Department. We have our mission, and every one of the commissioners that I've been associated with follow that. So I truly appreciate your considering my application. It's an honor to be here again, and I look forward to the opportunity if it's afforded. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Really
Thanks, Jim.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our 3 interviews. We'll move on to agenda item number 6. But first of all, we're going to go ahead and do our points, do our voting. Cindy, do you want our points right on our notes? I see there's a column there for points that are awarded. Would you like each board member to vote right on this form?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be fine. I mean, you can just hand them down.
Thank you, yeah. I know we went through it earlier in the meeting, but as a reminder for all of our board members, you have up to 20 points to allocate to these 3 interviewees. You cannot cast more than 10 votes for one particular person, and you are not obligated to allocate all 20 points. Pat, you should have a summary and notes page. Looks like this. Do you have a spare one? Cindy, perfect, he can vote on that. Do any of the board members have any questions on the voting process? Pat, if you could please write your name in across here since we don't have that. So if everybody can complete that, and we'll pass them down to Cindy for tabulation.